So this week, we know that Elon Musk and I presume most of his other tech bros, but particularly Elon, are big fans of universal basic income. And the reason for that is very clear, because as far as Elon Musk is concerned, his robots will be doing everything that mankind could possibly want. He'll be making untold wealth as a result of all of that because it's his company. And the rest of us won't have a job because we're all being replaced by robots. So how does he make money if there's nobody with any money? Well, obviously, we have to have a universal basic income. So we've got money to buy the things that Elon and his friends are making. So, Steve, no wonder they are fans of universal basic income. But actually, what that amounts to is the government or whoever is paying this universal basic income subsidizing these companies.
Yeah, but if you roll forward and let's assume we're not going to destroy the planet using climate change or nuclear war, and then say, okay, what is this technology going to do over time? It means that one of the reasons that employment grew from the 19th century forward was the need for process workers in manufacturing and for clerical workers in administration in large corporations, which are the main form of employment for most people in the private sector, as well as the government. So that set of demands was vital. And one intriguing thing, if you look back at Marx's expectations back in the 19th century, he talked about the immiserization of the working class and argued that as capitalists commodified everything, all workers would end up in the same category and they would have no income and there'd be all the jobs would be commodified. In fact, for most of the period between Marx wrote and now, that has been false, because to actually handle the complexity of modern corporations, you needed a huge human internal bureaucracy inside all of those companies. So most of the employees in major corporations are clerical workers. They're not actually process workers. And then the same thing in the government. You needed a huge diversity of people. So there was this growth in the middle class. And that's where the prosperity really came from in the 50s and 60s, with this huge expansion in the middle class. If you go back to the 19th century, the middle class was far smaller, the working class was far larger. So the expansion was the middle class, not the proletariat. But that's happening now. And now you've got robotics and AI. Marx's vision can finally come true. And that is a terrifying vision in one sense, because if you don't have some form of money creation that puts money in the hands of the poor, then there's no need for them. And we're talking 90% of the population could quite peacefully have their positions eliminated by robotics and AI.
Yeah. So the efficiency is creating inefficiency, isn't it? Because I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I was born in the 60s. My first job, actually, I remember. My mum's job was working in a typing pool, for God's sake. So this was the days when someone wanted to communicate with somebody else within the business, and they didn't want to pick up a phone. They wanted to send a note for the record. They would dictate it. That dictation was then typed up by someone to create a memo. The memo was sent to wherever it was, maybe even in the same office, maybe just across the floor. It was put into an envelope. And then the mailman would move around and distribute this into everyone's in trays. That was, all of that's being replaced. So all of those jobs replaced by email. So that was the first efficiency. The fact that now the person who actually wants to send that message is going to be replaced by a computer because artificial intelligence is going to do a lot of his or her work is scary stuff, isn't it?
It is. It is. And the scale of it would be quite enormous, because one reason capitalism works, it was a mass consumption society. You made money out of selling goods and services to workers. There are very, very many divisions in a capitalist economy in terms of who produces what and who it's sold to and so on. But fundamentally, the empires like Walmart, et cetera, wouldn't exist if you only had Elon Musk going shopping. Okay? It's the workforce that's tagged onto that that's a huge part of demand. And one of Koleski's best observations was that the government spending in excess of taxation ends up in the hands of the businesses, because you spend it on the workers. They spend all of their money, and therefore the money that you give to the workers ends up as profit. So this was. I wish this was something that Musk and co were aware of, but clearly they're not, because they're railing against government money spending creation at the same time. So they have a fallacious combination of ideas. If they actually succeeded in the transformation of the production system that they're talking about, so we did have AI taking over every job which could be done by a bot, and then robots took over all the work that could be done by manual labour and processing, then literally 90% of jobs would disappear. But with them, so not 90%, but a substantial proportion of aggregate demand would disappear, and we'd end up in a funk. And that funk, well, I think, would lead to the Hunger Games as their outcome, not a decent society.
And we're also consuming less, or we're consuming more digital products. So I look at my son, for example, who's definitely a class 1 digital native. He just lives online. He works online. Everything he does is through a screen. There's not much you can sell him except food. And I think that's the same for lots. And I think about, even I'm a bit of a gadget geek, but I think about how many of the gadgets I don't need anymore because they've all been replaced by things that my phone is going to do. And then think about when we were kids and the toys that were created, board games, etc., to try and keep us entertained, maybe bouncing balls, or there's all of this stuff is now being replaced by online. There's the online world, the digital world, is consuming all products. There's less opportunity to create physical things now, except for the essentials, like cars and food and holidays, travel related stuff. But there's less of the stuff that we used to see in shops, new ideas of things, physical objects that we must buy.
Well, the physical objects themselves are dominated by what we use for the online services for. So it's all, flip phones and foldable screens. Yeah. And I'm a junkie on that front as well. It's I've always been a leading adopter of new technology. But, yeah, and we need that for survival as well, frankly. But there's no guarantee that we're going to get a reduction in energy consumption out of it. The way we're going, the Jevons paradox will apply, and we'll use more energy for virtual holidays as well as still going on physical holidays. We'll add on top. We won't substitute. But yeah, with all this stuff, if we take away the source of income of the working class, then what's going to be the shape of the economy is the important question. And in that question, I support the idea of universal basic income at some point in the future. But how are you going to have UBI unless the government runs a deficit?
Yeah, well, and it'd be interesting to see what Elon's thoughts are on that. But if we look at, because presumably the companies will have to pay. That's the assumption as part of it, isn't it? But they're not going to be. They're going to be in no rush to do that. So here's a chart for those of you not watching on video. I'm just showing what the market cap was in 2015 versus 2025 for some of the big tech companies. So Apple, that was worth 700 billion. Is now worth 3 trillion. So it's grown 4 times. NVIDIA, less software company actually providing the hardware, isn't it, of course, but 15 billion has gone to 4.2 trillion. So that's, that's a sign of how important AI is being seen as. It's grown 280 times. Microsoft has grown by a factor of 10, Amazon by a factor of 10 as well. This is in terms of their market cap. So these dominant companies are just becoming ever more dominant. Their share prices just keep on going up. They start to assume more and more of all the investment on the planet. And you can just see that, we are going to get down to a handful of companies existing, not just in America, but in the world. So if they are reliant on us having a universal basic income, then presumably they have to pay for it.
Well, the thing is, they wouldn't, because why would you employ people if you can employ a robot? And this is the paradox. The only way.
But who are you going to sell to if no one's making any money?
Sorry?
Who are you going to sell to if no one's making any money?
Sell. So, like, Elon has this fantasy of pumping out billions of robots, but it'd be great to buy a robot that did the cooking and cleaning. Bang, there, that task goes back at home. But if that's going to cost you $20,000 when you're earning zero, then you can't buy the robot in the first place. So the only way that it can be done is if you get money from another source, and rather from private sector employment, it's going to be government employment, and that means the government has to spend the money and create it. So to have UBI, you've got to have a government creating money, fiat money, and that means it's got to run a deficit. Now, this is something which, of course, Musk clearly has not got his head around, because he's arguing that if you do it, we're all going to be ruined. And he's stuck in the loanable funds fantasy of neoclassical economics, whether he knows it or not. That's where his mind is. So he's got two contradictory thoughts going here, and that's not a good way to move forward.
Well, and even before we get to the stage where no one is employed, already we see a huge difference between how much money is being made in the tech sector versus the rest of the world. So Amazon's net income per employee is about 800,000. For General Motors, it's 48,000. For Walmart, it's less than 9,000 compared to 43,000 for Amazon. These huge variations, but there you are. Walmart, a low margin business. Basically, its profit is about 9,000 per person. Meanwhile, you've got Apple making 600,000 per person. Just that imbalance is extraordinary.
Yeah, it is, and of course, it doesn't fit into conventional economic thinking either, because they would presume everything returns to a uniform profit rate. That was a mistake of Marxists as well to believe that, not just neoclassicals. But yeah, you can have these huge divergences because the technological requirements to make those goods are vastly different. So if you're going to make a car, you've got to be, you've got to have a factory, you've got to have machinery, raw materials coming in. There's physical costs that are absolutely critical to make the product. When you're talking internet companies, it's data servers, energy is necessary, but people, nope. And we're going to nup a lot of other sectors as well at that point. And then if you nup them, then they can't be customers. And you're in the paradox that Marx saw coming for capitalism is now a possibility.
Well, Elon Musk talked about the universal basic income. Actually, he didn't call it the universal basic income. He calls it the universal high income because he thinks everyone is going to be so well off. He was talking about this at the AI Safety Summit that he came to in the UK in 2024. And his argument is, although the steps to this needs to be worked out, obviously, but all his robots and all of this new creation from this new age that we are just about on the verge of is going to see such untold growth, limitless. In fact, I think is a word he used, because there's obviously an unending supply of energy and resources on the planet. So limitless growth. There's going to be such a massive surplus that it's going to be very easy to fund this universal high income. So there's your answer, Steve. It all comes from the surplus. But presumably the surplus, this massive surplus is being seen as massive company profits for his company and all the others.
They're going to find out the hard way. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately, and so are the rest of us. I mean, the vision which Musk has, fortunately, he's also somebody who believes in taking humanity off planet, but his focus has been, an outpost on Mars, whereas his other companion in that same billionaire class, Bezos, is talking about getting, I think they're called Allen spheres, I've forgotten the actual proper name, but physical abodes which people live on off planet, which also produce goods and services. And you need robots to work in outer space. So all this stuff makes eminent sense. If you're talking about infinite, it's not going to be infinite. Infinite's a crazy word. We should ban it from the language when we're talking about even the universe itself, because if we maintain the greater growth of energy, the consumption we've had for the last 300 years, pretty much, it's been about 2.3% growth per year, which is a factor of 10 increase in energy consumption per century. And if we try to do this on this planet, so 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 over 400 years, according to physicists, and I think Musk claims to have some links with physics, that would increase the thermodynamic waste energy generated by the human species so much that we would raise the equilibrium temperature of the surface of the planet to the boiling point of water. That's
So-
strict physics. It's got nothing to do with global warming. Okay?
Right.
And I know Musk is a fool on global warming as well. Unfortunately, I've seen some of his dialogue saying it's a woke conspiracy. There's all sorts of ways that the tech bros are going to walk into the reality of technology, and it ain't going to be what they expect.
But also, what's the point in all of this? So it seems like growth for growth's sake. So we say, well, okay, we've got this ability for the economy to keep on growing without human beings involved. All we've got to do is find a way that human beings can still get paid so that they can be consumers. That's our whole focus, rather than being. And that's I have a big problem with that as well, because humans have got to have a purpose, and the purpose isn't just to consume. The purpose of humans is to create. But he's saying, "Oh, don't worry about that. People like me will create. The rest of you, you plebs, you'll just be consumers, and we're going to give you the robots to wash and clean your house." And people are going to be going, "Well, I've got all day. I can wash and clean the house myself."
Well, in some ways, this is a necessary vision for a future of humanity that makes sense, because we have always used slaves. Okay. Ever since civilization came together, we were enslaving other tribes. That predates agrarian civilization as well. We know that there were slaves in as big a structure as could be built in migratory humans when we were forced to migrate by the fact that we were hunters and gatherers. And then we enslaved animals. And then, like, the workforce can be seen as their wage slaves, etc., etc. So the ultimate vision is we don't have to enslave anybody, because when you're enslaving, what you're doing is getting hold of a source of energy which has got enough intelligence for you to tell it what to do, and it will then do what you need to do with that energy. So, animals ploughing a field is better than humans trying to plough a field. So we tie the animal up, we feed them, they obey us because we're the dominant species, and bang, we get the field ploughed in those days. Then it becomes tractors. Now we're talking tractors operated by robots. You've got the ecological issue, which we certainly have not addressed. But the vision in the future is that the robots will be our slaves. And that will mean that we're free to do all the creative stuff that we should be doing. And this is like current advocates for universal basic income. At the moment, I prefer to see what I call guaranteed basic income. They talk about people not being paid to do nothing, but paid to do anything. See, the ideas would all turn into Aristotle's, sitting around and philosophizing all the time.
Yeah, but that's bullshit, isn't it? For the vast majority of the population, not to talk down my fellow human beings, but the vast majority will do nothing. They will just sit at home watching Netflix, getting fat.
Quite probably, unfortunately. And this. It's how do you create a society where people...
Well, more to the point, people like Elon will be making damn sure that that's what we do, because they'll have the products to make sure that we're there doing nothing, paying back the money that we've been given.
This is a combination of the Hunger Games and Brave New World. It's all quite a feasible outcome. We really have to think about the shape of society we want to have in the future, and just saying that robots will take over all the work does not say anything about how do you then make humans go back to their origins, which is where we used to live in small communities, and we got our self-sense out of our contribution to that small community. That's what's got to be rebuilt as well, and I haven't seen that on any tech bro plans recently.
No, because saying, well, okay, you don't need to farm because farming is hard work. It can all be done by robots and machines. You just need to look at Clarkson's farm to see that farming is hard work, but there's a purpose there for all those farmers, and machinery is making it just bearable for them. Replace all of that, then what do they do? There's the point of technology is useful to a point, but when it's doing everything, what is the point? So, okay, where does this money come from? Who pays for it? By the way, Milton Friedman, I know you're a big fan of his work.
Yeah. Particularly British seed was my preferred, but sauteed with a nice Chianti.
He had thoughts on universal basic income, actually, of sorts. He believed if you earn below a threshold, you should get paid by the tax office rather than you pay them. So like a negative income tax as a way of simplifying welfare. Now, I think that's possibly bad because I'm sure he was just going, well, okay, let's just efficiently create a system where if your income is below a certain level, tax office will pay you. And we don't need to worry about things like you've only got one leg or you need a medicine. That can all be covered by the fact that we're paying you. But actually, I mean, to Milton Friedman's credit, that's actually quite a simple way of doing it, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
and the negative income tax.
Tax office issues welfare just by paying back some of the taxes it's got in.
Yeah. I mean, this is part of the neoclassical fantasy about the real world, that workers have got an option, that they can go to work or they can stay back and produce in their own house. They can't do the latter. So there's compulsion that means people can't do that. Friedman's idea, in a sense, reproduces the neoclassical vision that you can survive without having to go and get a job.
Yeah, well, but isn't that what we're talking about?
Indeed, on the Debunking Economics podcast with me and...
Do you want to finish off? Do you want to go to the break, Steve?
I think we should go to the break, Matty. It's sort of past the halfway hour, the 20-minute mark now.
All right, okay, back in a second. So we are looking at universal basic income, or universal high income, as Elon Musk would like to call it. What he hasn't done is told us where the money is going to come from. He's obviously clearly concerned that in this future where his company, and maybe a handful of others, will control the world and make all the money. Who's going to buy the products if he's not employing people because everyone's buying who's going to buy his robots to do everything if you haven't got any money is his problem through all of this. So maybe you could say, well, okay, they pay for it. So if, we'll heavily tax these big tech companies, which obviously is being fought against. Europe tried to introduce a digital sales tax. Donald Trump is, fighting against that, obviously, because he wants these big tech companies to be dominant, because dominant companies like this make America dominant. So not only have we got big tech dominant, we've also got a very dominant America and all the politics that's involved in all of that as well, which given American politics right now is a bit of a scary situation. But if you were to say, well, okay, let's look at the Magnificent Seven, for example. Right now, they make about $357 billion in profit, net income. If you just say, well, okay, let's tax half of that, so they keep half and the other half goes to people so that they've got money so they can buy their stuff. That would only work out in America at about $800 per adult, whereas if you take the combined wages currently, which is about $11 trillion, that's about $50,000 per adult. So we're a long way off tech companies being able to say, even if we were to say, well, let's tax them at 50%, a long way off being able to give them that universal basic income that's going to be anything close to what they're getting currently. So, there's a step change required here.
Yeah, there's a step change, and there's also a step change of bloody understanding the monetary system. And this is the irony that I find out of all this stuff, because I do support the notion that if we survive as a civilization, which I think is unlikely, but if we do, and we get to this technological nirvana, then if you do have 90% of the work eliminated, so workers can't get wages in the private sector, you're not going to get banks lending to create money to sell goods when the people who you're trying to sell to don't have any money. So the only way to get around this problem is government money creation. And that's one thing that I know that Musk and co have no understanding of. So you would need a step change. You need in thinking, say, okay, the government exists to make sure that people who don't own the means of production don't starve and can actually live moderately enjoyable lives. If you want to become one of the tech giants who are up the top end of the income distribution, you've got to create something new which lets you break into that market. But what we've got fundamentally is a feudal system evolving, because once the majors are there and they control so much of manufacturing and so much of services as well, it's going to be incredibly hard for somebody with a new idea to get through. So it is, and this is we spoke with our good mate Yanis Varoufakis some time back talking about techno-feudalism. He was just talking about the current situation where Apple will take 30% of my money on Patreon because they can. gatekeeping. I think they've lost that little battle, by the way, but that's what they can do. Well, this is the ultimate in techno-feudalism, because you have a bunch of tech lords who control the manufacturing system, who've designed the robots which do all the work for them, who can be their police force, which is the thing I'm really scared about, and then the 80-90% of the population that can't get a job are going to starve, which is Hunger Games. So the only way to solve that is to say we have to create sufficient money by the government spending more than it gets back in taxation. It's got to spend that on the poor, who then can buy the products from the rich, and the rich still get the money. They end up accumulating it, but it has to pass through the poor and give them a sufficient income to have an enjoyable life. And this is a complete transformation of the nature of society. But you've got to understand the monetary system as well as the productive system, and I think that's where the tech bros completely fall down at the moment.
And the politics of this scares the hell out of me, because if you've got these companies that have got so much power, and we saw that, they can buy elections, they can drive the political agenda.
I think a bloke called Musk bought the last election, but I think he's actually disappointed that the goods he bought are shoddy. As a consumer, he's not bloody good, really, frankly. I mean,
So he's never going to do it again. But
he's trying to start his own political party, so I believe. And what he's going to do with that political party is eliminate the source of money that could finance a universal high income.
Yeah. So that's not going to work. But I mean, but it is scary that they will have so much control, and they will ultimately have political control. And how far does that politics go? So if they say ultimately, well, we create these products for which there's a market, there's people, even though we are creating money through the government, so even though the government is now, so through government money creation, and we talked last week about how the amount of money that's got to be created has got to be in line with growth in the economy, otherwise you will get inflation. So imagine they reach this finely balanced point where there's a few big companies that are controlling the world who say, well, okay, let's control the money supply in line with growth so we don't get inflation, because that would create problems for our companies that we'd have to cope with. So we can, at long last, we can control the whole system ourselves. There's people who are not buying their products. Even though we are giving them the money, they are not buying our products. What use are those people? They may as well be dead.
And that's the Hunger Games outcome. That's the one that probably most scares me about the potential future of this. So, like at the moment, UBI would not work because you'd be basically just inflating the price system by creating more money. Everybody gets the same amount. That's why I go for a guaranteed basic income at the moment. But we do have to transition to a UBI if we actually make this technological transformation. And that requires us to understand what fiat money is, which they don't currently understand. Their fantasy is Bitcoin. Well, you do Bitcoin, it's not going to be 90% of the people that die, it's going to be 99%, because only a tiny handful own the Bitcoin. And if you then have the Bitcoin monetary system, then what do you do to people who don't own Bitcoin, like you and me? We'd suddenly be unable to buy anything, we'd starve. So there's all sorts of social distribution issues that the tech bros have not thought about properly at the moment. And the only viable way is that they realise the government creating fiat money and then spending it on the poor, who then buy the products of the rich. That's the only way their system that they're designing can survive with the high population that Musk also wants to achieve. He wants to have more people on the planet and wants them to be wealthier. Well, in effect, the poor are the ones who don't accumulate money. This is the thing. So if they receive it, they're going to spend it. Okay, most of it. So if you want to have a universal high income, you've got to say you're getting everybody enough money to consume all they need to be comfortable in consumption items, and have a bit spare if they want to do something else. It's high income after all, so maybe they can try to become the next Michelangelo, or they can try to break into the tech bro world by producing their own product. They've got to be paid sufficient to make that feasible. Now, if you can't do that through the private banking sector, because the banking sector itself is going to try to find the individuals who are going to succeed in the overall system. They're not going to fund people who aren't going to succeed in themselves making more money. So the only way this functions is to understand the government has to create the fiat money, pay it to everybody, so everybody gets a minimum capacity to buy the goods and services produced by the the feudal companies that have now evolved, and then those feudal companies accumulate the money, which lets them buy the energy and the inputs that they need to make their robots, and so on and so forth. It can be done, but I've got no hope, no confidence at the moment that the tech bros who are pushing this have any idea of the structure of society that's required.
Well, it's very clear, isn't it, that they think innovation should come from them. I mean, so the idea, even if the universal high income was high enough that you had a bit left over, so you could actually go to a bank and say, look, I've got this great idea. I want to borrow some money. Here's how much I've saved up as, collateral. The bank's just going to go, well, what, you want to borrow money? Why? It's a risk. All these big companies are funding their progress from their own surplus. They're not borrowing any money. Why should we get involved in the lending money game to compete against all the money that they have, which they can use to quash any idea you come out with? Yeah. Banks just will not be interested in that.
And one good reason that the private banking sector doesn't fund entrepreneurs right now is that this is just a rule of thumb. But if you have 10 entrepreneurs, 9 are going to fail. And so if you gave each of them $100,000, you're going to lose $900,000 and get interest on $100,000. It's a losing proposition for the banks. So if you want that to be feasible, you've got to take in Islamic banking, because the Islamic banking system you still get loans in the Islamic banking system, but the lender gets an equity share in the company that's been financed. So in that case, if you had same story, 100,000 per 10 entrepreneurs, 9 of them go bankrupt, one turns that 100,000 to 10 million, the bank gets a share of that, the bank comes out ahead. So you have to reform the private banking system as well to go towards Islamic banking rather than the current Western banking, which simply doesn't work with entrepreneurs. So there's all these things which the tech bros need to have in their heads to be able to design this perfect world they see in the future. But clearly, the level of understanding I'm seeing coming out of them all at the moment, particularly Musk, shows they don't know what they're talking about. So what we're likely to get out of that is a chaotic outcome, not a sustainable one.
Or a worrying outcome as well. Even if they did start to understand how money works and they start to work around that, the ultimate game about the control they have is a big concern. So there's a discussion on LinkedIn about all of this. There's a couple of quotes that I quite liked. One is that the UBI, the tech bros are seeing it almost as like hush money. If we pay you this money, you won't notice just how wealthy that we are becoming. And someone else saying, it's actually the way they're looking at it is like a software engineer would look at it. They see UBI is almost like a patch update. We've got late capitalism. We've got we want to have minimal disruption, but we want to maximize our narrative control. So here's a patch update. UBI is just like, without thinking it through, it's just it's just quick fix to the next stage without thinking about the consequences of it.
And you've got to think in systemic terms, and that's That's been my modus operandi for my whole life, thinking in a systemic sense. That's why I developed Ravel, to make that more feasible for people to be able to do. But without the capacity to think that way, they do a patch and it crashes the rest of the system.
Yeah. So the system, if we accept this final point on this, because I feel like this is the answer, if we accept the system is broken or it's reached the end of its line because, we've been talking about the accumulation of capital forever in economics. And this is like the ultimate extent of it, isn't it? All capital has accumulated in a handful of companies that control the world. That's the ultimate stage at which capitalism, we can well and truly say, is broken. So what is the alternative system? I would have thought, and within that, all of that accumulation is in America as well. And already we're seeing Donald Trump.
This could be China now.
Well, okay, too, yeah. But the rest of the world is all answerable to, two states perhaps.
China and what's left of America.
And we're already seeing Donald Trump going around and, using that power to try and get people to, negotiate to people to pay his taxes for him, his people's taxes for him in the form of tariffs. What if, someone like Europe and the rest of the world just got smart and says, well, okay, the end game from all of this is not good. Two issues, the concentration of power in companies and the concentration geographically. And it's all to do with tech. And all of this can be recreated. And maybe it needs to be recreated as a cooperative. So, for example, we say Facebook, which, by the way, is just shunting so much stuff at you now, which is nothing to do with what your friends are doing, but it's all the ads that they want you to see, is to say, because that makes more money, is to say, yeah, Facebook's banned now in Europe. Sorry about that. What we will do is have an initiative which is sponsored by the government, but is owned by the people. And so everyone benefits in the spoils of that success, and everyone has a say in what it does. So that all the societal issues that come from all of this are determined by the people as well. Now, I know that's a bit socialist, maybe.
Well, it's actually, I think I agree with you on this one. Okay, it's nationalist, and it's saying ultimately our communities, our real communities, are local. Okay. And we need to, if we continue going down the tech bro way, I spend my time in front of a screen, so do you. Most of my friends are nowhere near where I live, though I do have several good friends in Holland. And what you want to do is start using this incredible largesse we would get out of a world in which robots did all the work to enable us to rebuild the human communities we used to have. And the thing is, what's the essential nature of humans? Are we, remote, isolated individuals, which is what the tech will turn us into? Or are we social beings who get our meaning out of a community? And therefore, is our current structure really working on that front? The reality is no. The people you don't talk to these days are the ones you're most close to. I know one or two people in my flat, in my apartment block here, but most of them I just nod and walk past. I'll never get to know them.
Do you find they're scurrying behind their doors as you open yours, Steve?
Sorry?
Is that what's happening there? Is that their choice? Anyway, no, go on.
So
but yeah, your point, we're losing that sense of community.
We need to rebuild those localized small communities. So to some extent, once we have that level of largesse, any argument for globalization goes out the window because once you can create a robot, there's a huge. We're going through the technological phase at the moment, but at some point it'll be absolutely commonplace to make a robot. And so you make the robots and you then redesign your local community so you can go back to the structure of humanity where we used to really, really bond with our local people. And that's what we need to be seeing this as doing. One of my favourite books is A Long Road to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. Right. And in it he talks about what it felt like for him being a member of the Xhosa tribe as a young man, well before he became the international statesman he died as. And he said he could not imagine anything better than being a member of the Xhosa tribe. The level of bonding which occurs in tribal communities is far higher than we get in our disaggregated Western world.
We're all getting detached from our communities.
We need to get reconnected
which is
with
sort
them.
of, which wasn't the point I was trying to make, but it is related to it. My point was, so say, for example, Elon says, yes, I can create loads of robots. We shouldn't say, okay, well, your company creates the robots, you determine who gets them, what the price is, what they can do, because all of the decisions you're making and the control that you hold is too much for society to place on one man. If you believe you can make robots, then a company will be set up, which will be a cooperative that will buy those robots, but determine the specs for them based on what people believe is right for society, rather than you making the call on all of this. So you can be a supplier, but companies can't grow to such a large size that the influence that you have is excessive profits, which makes everyone poor. Even worse, you then use that power to determine how much money everyone gets, plus you're determining the policy around that. That is too much control.
Yeah, too much feudalism.
So we need to have more cooperatives, operating companies that are providing these services. And that means pulling apart all of these big tech companies and putting them into cooperatives, regionally based cooperatives. So what does Facebook look like for Europe? What does X look like for Europe? And we're trying to do it through regulation at the moment, which again is government-controlled regulation, which is probably a bad thing. But if we had a system where that was put into a sort of a corporate approach, but working as a cooperative, which there should be many more of. I mean, we've talked about it in the past. Cooperatives are very successful. Quite a few big companies in the UK that are operating as cooperatives. I think that's the replacement for late stage capitalism, isn't it? And if we've got more time on our hands, we've got more ability for us to spend time arguing what the future should look like rather than just accepting it.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's a complete redefinition of society, and that's the tech bros have got the technology worked out. They haven't got the reorganisation of society anywhere near right, and that's probably been the human condition.
And they're going to fight against it.
Yeah,
because their part in it all gets devalued by that human race thing. Bloody humans getting in the way again. Well, I mean, it's got to happen, hasn't it? That's the only answer.
Well, that's if we don't wipe ourselves out in the meantime, and I'm afraid I'm on the pessimistic side, we'll destroy our capacity to do this before we can actually exercise it.
Right. Well, we need to start a movement, Steve, to stop us killing ourselves and arriving at a future which is more equitable and more in control as well. Anyway, there we are. Once again, we've got a solution. We've just got to do it.
Yeah, the one need is money.
Yeah, well, and the political clout maybe as well.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
And actually the bottle to do it, the bottle to take on these people as well. You know, wouldn't it be fantastic if Europe said, well, okay, I mean, Europe can't organise itself as it is, so it's never going to happen. But I mean, wouldn't it be fantastic if Europe as an entity said, well, we're quite a big part of the world's population. We've got quite a bit of money. Let's use our clout. This is what we demand. Donald Trump, we're pissed off with you putting all these tariffs on us. We're going to put even bigger tariffs on your tech companies now. See how you like that? You know, you've been tariffing us on goods. Let's have a look at where the real money is. Let's look at how much we can tariff you on services. Let's start at 1,000%, Donald, using your negotiating technique, and maybe we'll come down to 950 if you're really nice to us. Wouldn't that? I'd just love that to happen. Anyway.
Another fantasy. Okay.
It's fantasy. I live in a fantasy world. That's for sure. All right. Catch you next time,
mate,
Steve.
bye.